Hello and welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things relating to your well-being, ranging from nutrition to physical and mental health, and my 5-minute food facts series. I'm Amanda Hayes, your host, a nutritionist with a passion for well-being. Before I introduce today's guests, I'll mention that although I'll often be speaking with experts, any information or advice provided in Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast is not intended to treat, cure or prevent injuries, disease or medical conditions, and it's not a substitute for advice from your own health professional. Today I am here with John Stamoulos, an international breathwork expert. If, like me, you're not really sure what breathwork is, I'll just paraphrase a bit from John's website. He says, breathwork is a powerful approach to self-exploration and healing that integrates insights from modern consciousness research, anthropology, psychology, Eastern spiritual practices, and mystical traditions of the world. And he goes on to say, breathwork takes most people far beyond traditional cognitive therapies to provide a deeper, non-verbal path to healing. So my understanding is that it's all about healing. But we will leave it to John, the expert, to explain that to us. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi there.
Thank you for coming on my podcast today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So I think the best place to start our conversation today is for you to explain to our listeners what breathwork is. And I know it's quite complex, so I thought I'd like to start with the physical aspect of it in terms of how you actually do it and how is breathwork breathing different from regular breathing?
Good question. Okay, so in a nutshell, breathwork is a breathing technique. And what happens in this technique is you breathe consciously. So we call it conscious connected breathing. So conscious means you're awake and connected means there's no pause between the inhale and exhale. Now, in a typical sort of session, you will lie down for the breath work, and the facilitator basically guides you into the breathing process. So you control the inhale, relax the exhale, no pause between inhale and exhale.
And how's that different though from when we're breathing every day and we're not really thinking about it? Do we pause between them?
I think we do. We tend to generally have a pause. And also with this technique, the breathing is fuller. So you actually control the inhale until you feel your lungs. And then you, on the exhale, you just surrender and relax. And as soon as the exhale finishes, you consciously inhale. And that's the difference.
Right. So you're thinking about it quite actively as you're doing it. Correct. Then from the sounds of it. Yes. So, and before we go into what breathwork can do, I just want to ask you, how did you come across it?
Well, I'd heard about this technique, and there are many different names for different styles of breathwork. Originally, I'd heard of the rebirthing technique. Didn't know anything about it, but I was living in New York, and I had a pretty sort of stressful experience. You know, in life, I always say we have our ups and our downs, and I had a big down, and I ended up coming back to Australia and found a breath worker, and then had my first session.
And that you obviously loved it because you kept doing it?
To be really honest, it's not that I loved it. For me as a guy, I think it really helped me in the interview section to actually release and talk a lot about what had happened to me. So the breathing process itself was, it was pretty good. I felt pretty light after. I didn't really fully understand it. And then the breath worker said, when you're ready, have another session, because normally we suggest about 10 private sessions. So I had my second session, and it was incredibly painful, physically painful. And I thought, I don't like this technique at all.
No one likes pain.
Exactly, yeah.
Something must have happened because you've gone on to qualify as a breath worker. So how do you do that? What are the, processes to becoming qualified?
So with breath work, back then for me, what had happened is I'd continued to have private sessions. Normally, before you embark on a journey of training as a breath worker, you should really have 10 private sessions with a practitioner. So for me, I did that, and then I signed up and did a training with 2 breath workers that were co-teaching, and it was back then it was about 6 months, and it was like 4 days a week. And originally I did it for me. I didn't actually do it to become a trainer or a breathwork practitioner.
So you did it to learn more so you could help yourself essentially.
Absolutely, yeah. And I wanted to help my son as well because we'd been through this trauma.
Right. And then what was it that sort of made you expand that to want to help other people?
Well, because I was working as a body therapist, a remedial and sports therapist, I see a lot of people with a lot of stress in their lives, and I thought, wow, this technique would be really good for some people as well.
Yeah.
And the trainers encouraged me because of my body work to actually train as a breath worker as well. So with their encouragement, I continued.
Yeah, well, that's great. And so now let's sort of dive a bit deeper into breath work. So you've told us about how you physically do it, but then what's the purpose of it? I believe it's a form of healing. So can you talk to us about that? What can be healed?
So with the actual technique, it works at different levels, and it really works with what I think the client is ready to deal with. So what happens is, as you begin to breathe, you go into a non-ordinary state of consciousness, a relaxed state. That's the first state, is relaxation. So because of the relaxation, people that are highly stressed get to actually physically release some of that, physical tension and symptoms of stress. And then as you continue to breathe, you go into the physical body. So you become aware of, tension in your back, your neck, shoulders.
Are you talked through this?
In the beginning, what happens is I guide people into the breathing process, and then it's non-verbal. It's not really for me to interject too much. Only just every now and then I might ask, hey, what's that feeling or that thought? Yeah.
So in terms of the healing, let's just delve into that a bit more. Apart from physical, like releasing tension, what about emotional sort of healing?
Well, that can be a very big component in breath work. We have a lot of suppressed emotions and memories from the moment that we're, conceived. There's a lot of research now into the time we spend in utero, any traumas our mothers feel, corticosteroids get affected, they pass through to us. So any sort of trauma, womb trauma, early childhood traumas can surface. However, as I say to people, what I love about this technique is that the subconscious really will only, the gating system kind of opens and something comes out, what you can actually physically, mentally, and emotionally handle. It doesn't open and everything comes out.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a measured kind of...
It is, and it's about trust.
Yeah.
Amanda, it's about trusting yourself.
Sure.
It's got nothing to do with me or the therapist. It's actually got to do with trusting yourself and your feelings and connecting. And let's face it, some people don't even know how they feel emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, I find this fascinating because, as we said before we started recording, I really like the way it's a non-invasive form of therapy. And I guess, do people get to the point where they can practice it themselves? Is that the kind of end goal, or is it better to go to a class?
Exactly. Look, as a practitioner of breath work, we always teach people to have at least 10 private sessions in order for them to master the process and feel safe to understand some of the symptoms they may get or the experiences they may have are normal. Then what happens is you can use the process whenever you want. You just lie down, you can put some music on if you want or not, lie down and do the connected breathing and use it as like a purification, an internal cleanse and a connection with the inner self.
Oh, that sounds great. You say that when people are practicing it, they spontaneously recall events of the past. Do you know why this happens? Do you have a theory or explanation?
Look, I'm not really sure about that. However, just say you came along and you had an intention and you said, you know what, John, I want to work around this event that happened in my childhood or, in my teenage years. Sometimes the subconscious will support that and whatever that issue is will come up in order to look at it, to maybe, breathe it out or breathe out any sort of emotion or physical tension that you've carried. And then you may not. You may come to me and just say, I just want to do a breathwork session, and then you might get surprised where, like a whole can of worms opens up or nothing opens up in that area. It could be something different. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So you could go to a breathwork session not really sure, like having this maybe feeling that things aren't quite right, but not knowing the cause, and it could potentially come out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I know it's also been referred to as rebirthing. So can you tell us what that means?
Okay, the word rebirthing, was coined by, I think it was Leonard Orr. He was the founder of that particular technique. Originally, when he was exploring the process, a lot of his work was done in a jacuzzi, in a spa bath. So the client is usually face down with a snorkel,
Right.
Usually 2 breath workers, and that would stimulate memories from the womb by being in the hot tub.
Do we all have those memories?
I think we do.
Yeah, interesting, isn't
think we
it?
do.
Because in a meditation course I'm doing, we're exploring our mind, and we have to try and think back and back and back and back. And some of the people that I'm doing the class with think or say they can remember their birth. So I guess it's in there somewhere. I can't. Do people find it traumatic ever?
Look, some people can find it traumatic in the sense that if they've had some traumas or violence in their life, it could resurface. And look, and if it does, basically the practitioner will talk through the process and maybe change the breathing a little bit in order for them to feel safe.
Yeah.
Because
So
it is about safety.
Yeah. I guess nothing physical can happen to you, but you need to be sure that people don't get too traumatized, I suppose, by their memories.
Exactly, especially if that memory is quite strong, the trauma. So sometimes, I might even say to the client, look, just open your eyes now and, stay present. And that kind of can bring them back into their body pretty fast.
Do you think ever breath work leads to people needing to see a psychologist or something like that? Or are they complementary, or are they kind of separate things?
I've had clients that have had some traumas come up that I would suggest they go and see a professional in that area. Let's just say there was, a sexual abuse or a violence. Then I would suggest they would go and work with someone that specializes in that area. And to be honest, I don't really work with people with psychiatric
No,
problems.
I guess they're different because you're facilitating these things coming out. It's not really, people aren't really going to you, I don't think, to treat those things. Is that a fair call or not?
I think so. I mean, like
Not
some
sure.
people have, obsessive behaviors or anxieties they want to work with. And breath work can work in those areas. However, also sometimes people just need to find other specialized sort of therapists.
And one thing I'm personally interested in, do you think there's similarities between breath work and meditation? You don't have to say yes. I'm just curious.
You know what? Breathwork is meditation and it's not.
Sort of, when I was reading about it, I thought a lot of things to me sound similar to meditation.
I won't say it's meditation because look, the focus is on the breath and it does become a mind-body experience. I have to also say that during the physical part of breathwork is it totally blows my mind how it works. But people start to experience a lot of tingling sensations through their body, like pins and needles. Then they might feel, look, the worst thing they will feel is cramps come on, or like spasms. And that happens a lot when there's a lot of resistance to the process, or if something is surfacing and they change their breathing, because the focus is on the inhale, not on the exhale. So it's not hyperventilation, it's conscious breathing. So if they change their breathing a bit, then of course they may experience a bit more tension. So then the practitioner will guide them back into connected breathing.
Right.
Yeah.
So is the tension, if someone experiences a cramp or a tension, is that somewhere in the body that relates to where their trauma was?
Good question. And yes, sometimes it definitely can be that.
Yeah.
So I might even ask the client, hey, what do you think you're holding on there? What's that thought, or what's behind that? And it's really up to the person to connect with that feeling.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of fascinating. It just shows how strong our minds are, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And the whole thing I'm learning about at the moment in this meditation class is how we need to look after our mind, and we don't do it so much in Western culture. But I think breathwork is a combination between East and West, and
definitely.
Yeah. So it is good to have these ways that we can actually look after our mind.
And I always think too that breathwork is based on the concept that our thoughts create our reality.
Yeah, very much so. And there is a quote, and I'll get this totally wrong, but what you think is what you say is what you become. That kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so can you share with us an inspiring story of something you've...
Oh, I have lots of
I'm
stories.
sure you
of
do.
breathwork. Okay, one thing that's coming to my mind is one of my students in Europe came to me and said that she had a client that wanted to work with her and also meet me because she wanted to die.
Oh.
And I said to her, well, she's definitely chosen the wrong people to come and teach her how to die. So the woman had some breathwork sessions with my student and also with myself. She'd suffered a really traumatic childhood, like traumas that are unbelievable, really. And then she created a lot of sort of discomfort in her body, and then she developed some diseases as well. I can't remember. I think it was called Hatchet syndrome or something.
Right.
That her spine was like she was having crush fractures and stuff
poor
like that,
lady.
and was in a lot of physical pain. So she did the breath work, and it started to change her. It's almost like, her increased life force changed her mind, and then she began to do more breath work. And she had signed up and come to Malaysia. I was running a breathworker training in Malaysia. I think it was back in 2008, and severely sort of crippled. And she continued with the breathwork. It changed her life, and I hadn't seen her for a few years. And then when I was in Europe, we caught up, and she was actually without a walking frame, was dancing, had changed her body because she was almost like trapped like a child. She was like really tiny and thin, and then she'd become this voluptuous woman.
Wow.
And it totally amazed me how her life transformed.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. And with that particular woman, had she tried other things before that hadn't worked? And
I think after the breath work, she continued doing more mindfulness, meditation trainings, a whole bunch of stuff. So she changed her whole life. However, breath work for her was the doorway, I guess.
Thing,
to the new way.
Wow. So again, it just sort of highlights how important it is, or the link between the body and mind is so profound,
Absolutely.
Isn't it? I know that one of the things you do in breath work is you work with affirmations. So can you tell us why they're important, and perhaps give us an example of the type of affirmations people might use?
I think affirmations are pretty important in changing our mindset. I think number one is be aware of what we're thinking. I think it's so easy to have a lot of negativity, in our lives and negative thinking patterns. We learn this a lot too, I think, from our environment.
Yeah, I think so. And even just listening to the news, it can be really depressing.
Yeah, I definitely don't listen to the news. I usually have either my patients or clients that will tell me all the bad news that I need to know. So, that saying, you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. And then I think it's Anthony Robbins that says, the first 5 people you hang around with is who you vibe and become like.
Oh, really?
So think about, who do you hang around with? What are they like? Are they positive or negative? And do they uplift you or do they bring you down?
Yeah.
And that is all important, I believe, in having sort of more positivity in life and being more conscious, and also changing my thoughts that are negative and don't support me.
Yeah, yeah. And that's actually quite hard to do, isn't it?
I think it
maybe not
be,
for you, but
that's a thought there itself. It's hard to do. So if you believe that, guess what, Amanda?
It is hard to do.
It is hard to do.
Yeah.
And that's where I would start. It's almost like you've got to become an enlightened detective and sort of look at, what is it you're thinking?
Yeah.
And how can I change that thought? And when you catch yourself, just say, okay, I'm going to change that. So, maybe instead of it's hard to do that, I might say, hey, it's easy.
Yeah. It can be done.
Yeah, it can be done.
Yeah.
Or, I can do it.
Or I can work at this and change it. So an example, what are some affirmations people might use?
I choose health.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I choose peace.
Yeah, that's nice.
Just keep it simple. I always say, like, with affirmations, they don't have to be complex. They can be quite simple as well. And
should people say them in the mornings, or how should people use them?
There's all different schools of thoughts. There's repetition, multiples of 7, some people say. In the old days, I used to write down a lot of my thoughts, and if I found a lot of negative thoughts, then I'll pick one and then change it, and then I would write it maybe say 20 times.
Right, just like to sort of reinforce that positive.
Because when you slow down and you actually look at things, it's interesting. And then also, when you do say something positive, it's interesting to see what the negative thoughts are that start to emerge. They're like weeds. It's almost like gardening.
Yeah.
So once you go, like I always say to people, if you have the thought, I'm innocent, watch what your subconscious will bring up. And they'll be like, hang on a minute. You remember that time you took that $2 from your mum's kangaroo purse? Right?
Yeah.
And so I think if we have a lot of negativity in our subconscious mind, it can also create sabotage.
Yeah,
I
that
don't
makes
deserve,
sense.
I'm not worthy.
Yeah. And onto something very positive. You say on your website, the essence of every human being is love. And I really like that statement. It's really profound. So let's think about that for a minute. So what do you mean by that? What's the essence?
I love the word essence.
Yeah.
So everybody has an essence. And if we removed all our ego,
Yes.
and it's just like when a baby's born, it is pure love and joy.
Yes.
And, if you've held a baby in your arms and you connect with that baby, you'll just feel the essence of love and joy. And we all started off that way. However, on our journey through life, some of us have built such a great wall around us to protect the real us, the real essence of who we are. And sometimes we lose ourselves in our journey and we forget who we are.
Yeah. And so can breathwork help people rediscover that essence?
Definitely. Breathwork is about essence. It's all about our feelings. And the end result, if people breathe correctly during a session, the end result is incredible peace and bliss.
That sounds
and
beautiful.
joy. It's like a natural high state.
Yeah.
It's like getting high on life naturally.
Oh, that's great. So do you recommend certain people do breathwork, or do you think pretty much anyone can benefit from it?
Anyone can benefit from it.
Sounds like it from what you've been saying.
So Amanda, when I first started doing breathwork, I actually used to work with kids from 7 years and up. And the reason I got into that area was because I was using it with my son. And then other people would hear about it, and then they would bring their kids along. And then before I knew it, I was kind of traveling and working. And I worked with a lot of different therapists as well that, would refer their clients to me, the kids to me. And then, worked with adults, couples, right up to the corporate world.
Wow. So it can benefit anyone of any age.
Absolutely.
From the sounds of it, yeah.
I remember once I was working in Europe and I had like a 85-year-old lady, and she had such a blissful experience, and then she kept grabbing my hand and kissing it, and she said to me, where have you been all my life?
Oh, that's
Why
so
weren't you
sweet.
here 60 years ago when I needed you?
Well, it's better to be happy at 85 than not at all.
Yeah, it was such an honor.
Yeah, that is lovely. I guess you get to experience those deep connections with people. That's really nice. And also, I guess when people come to a breathwork session, they're, in some ways, to me, it sounds quite brave because they're making themselves vulnerable, and we don't often do that.
Yeah.
So,
well, vulnerability is what leads us to our strength. If we're willing to be in a space where we can be vulnerable and open, then we can discover how strong we are inside.
Yeah, and it's probably a nice, safe place to do that in a breathwork session.
Yeah,
because you've supported.
That's the most important thing about breathwork, is that people understand that it is a safe space.
Yeah.
And all I will do, Amanda, is create a very safe space and facilitate so people can feel incredibly safe to go as deep as they want to go inside themselves.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds really amazing. If someone did attend one of your breathwork workshops, just walk us through what could they expect? What would the day look like?
Okay. So one of the things that I do run, not just in Adelaide where I'm based, but internationally as well, I run what's called a breathing circle. And basically all it is, it's a group breathwork. A few years back, someone decided to create the term breathing circles, and now there's even a website called breathingcircles.com. And so what happens in the breathing circle is people come along. Usually the practitioners will talk about what is breathwork and run people through. That can take about an hour. Then the clients can experience a 1 hour conscious breathing process, and then after that there'll be a debrief, and then it's like a taste of what breathwork is. And then if they like it, they can choose to either go and have a private one-on-one session, and then from that they can also go back to the group whenever they want. For example, in Adelaide, I run them monthly.
Okay, that's good to know. And I'll put links to all of this in the show notes. And with a private session, how long does that generally take?
Again, they're 3 hours. So
Yeah.
usually what happens in a private breath session is you'll receive, this is the way I work, a 14-page interview questionnaire that you fill out before you come along. There'll be a lot of questions there about your childhood, how you were born. So you can ask your mother or father or relatives questions about your early childhood if they're around and if you feel comfortable.
What if they're not? Then?
Well, that doesn't really
Yeah,
matter. Good question, but who
yeah.
cares? But the more you
Yeah.
know, the more it may help in finding
Sure.
patterns that you
Yeah.
may have
Yeah,
that
that
are
makes
related
sense.
to your birth process. And then you come along, we go through that interview question again, and then I might say to you, hey, what's your intention? Do you have an intention? Is there something you want to work on that I can support you with during the session? And then you'll lie down, you'll do the breathing, we play some music. And then after that, when you come out of the session, we debrief it, and then what next?
Okay.
You know, what choices do you have, or
Yeah.
what do you need to do, or what
so
support do you need?
You'll offer some guidance then.
Definitely, yeah.
Because it sounds like if someone's delved into some traumatic memories, they probably need a bit of a
Exactly, support
debrief, as
and
you say, and
you know, what's
Yeah,
next? How
what's
can
next?
what can I do to work through this?
Yeah. Oh, it really does sound quite extraordinary. And also, as you mentioned earlier, you're a qualified massage therapist. So do you see a synergy between that and breath work?
I'm so glad I'm a body worker. Look, a lot of times, like a patient will come into the clinic and I'll just think, oh my God, you really need to breathe. And what I find is so many people are disconnected from their bodies, their physical sensations, and they come in like bags of cement. And, even just
Wow.
the first thing I'll say to a patient when they lie down is, okay, take a couple of deep breaths and just let go. And then I'll put my hands on them and then I'll go, okay, well, I can feel that, like 30% of the tension's already gone. So then you get a real feel of what the soft tissue is like. Not many people are aware of that, I think.
No, I think in our daily lives often we're so busy we don't stop.
Absolutely.
And I think the tension can just keep on building,
Keeps
essentially.
us in business.
Yes,
That's what I
that's
say.
good for you.
Yeah.
And John, the final question I like to ask all my guests, if you could recommend 2 things that all people could do to improve their well-being, what would they be?
Well, I think the first thing that I'm thinking about is master your health. Look, most people come to me for 3 things. The first one is definitely health issues.
Yeah.
The second is relationship. And the third is work, abundance, stress, those things.
Yeah.
So, master your health.
Yeah.
Look at food, look at nutrition, question everything that you put in your mouth.
Yeah.
That's probably where I would start.
Yeah. Another one?
And another one would be, become aware of your breath.
Yeah.
Where do you hold your breath during the day? And one thing that people can do is, in the morning, instead of jumping out of bed, just spend 2 minutes doing some conscious breathing for 2 minutes, not much. And then at the end of the day, before you go to bed, do the same thing. Just take 2 minutes, breathe and connect with your body.
Yeah.
See how it feels. What are your thoughts as you're breathing? What are you thinking about?
I can imagine too that might help people get to sleep if they, just take those moments to focus on their breath before bed.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, of course, dealing with sleep issues now.
Yes,
and I think definitely being mindful and even listening to positive affirmations or little 5-minute meditations before you go to bed are
that's true.
a
Little
good thing
apps.
as well. Yeah, I have heaps of those that I use.
Okay, great. And if people would like to know more about breathwork or follow you or contact you, what's the best way, John?
Through my website, which is www.johnstamoulos.com.
Okay, and I'll put a link to that.
Yep, or you can find me on Facebook as well, John Stamoulos. And then in Adelaide, I have the breatheorg.com, which is the group breathwork that happens monthly here in Adelaide.
And where are those sessions held?
The monthly sessions are held at the Sophia Centre at Cumberland Park.
Okay.
And I've been actually running the breathing circles for about 15 years in Adelaide. I'm pretty proud to say it's one of the longest in the world of breathing circle. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I can't wait to check it out, John.
Yeah, we've got one coming up Wednesday the 18th of March.
Cool. Do you just book in online?
You can book in online, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to chat to you today.
Thank you so much too, Amanda.
And that was John Stamoulos. Isn't it interesting that breathing, something we do every day, if done in a particular way, can be a path towards healing and better health? So I hope you enjoyed that chat. You can subscribe to my podcast, Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, click on the bell to be alerted when new episodes are available. You can also subscribe on your favourite podcast app, including iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And you can follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Direct links to all social media can be found on the subscribe page of my website at www.amandaswellbeingpodcast.com. If you would like to contact me, you can send me a message via the contacts page on my website. And please feel free to suggest topics you'd like to learn more about and people you'd like to hear interviewed, and I'll do my best to deliver that to you. Producing the podcast is a labour of love. We put in a lot of time, money, and effort behind the scenes. So if you enjoy Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast and would like to make a contribution via Patreon, PayPal, or by Amazon, to help ensure we continue to provide you with excellent content, please visit the Contribute page on my website. Finally, please take a minute to leave a rating on iTunes. It improves visibility, it will help people find the podcast, and it will also help me source excellent guests. Thank you for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.